now my pleasure to invite on stage our distinguished panelists. Dr. Mashiur Rahman, Economic Advisor to the Prime Minister, Prime Minister's Office, Government of Bangladesh. Mr. Md Aziz Khan, Chairman, Summit Group, Bangladesh. Mr. Muhammad Abdul Halim, Director General, Governance and Innovation Unit, Prime Minister's Office, Government of Bangladesh. Ms. Rubana Haq, Managing Director, Mohammadi Group, Bangladesh. Ms. Samantha Farnaz, Consultant, Bangladesh International Finance Corporation. I would also like to invite on stage Dr. Iftekhar A Chowdhury, Principal Research Fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS, and former Foreign Minister of Bangladesh. Dr. Chowdhury will chair the session. I will now hand the floor to Dr. Chowdhury. Dr. Chowdhury, please.
Chairman-elect, Honorable Economic Advisor, High Commissioners of Bangladesh and Pakistan, Professor Subrata Mitra, ladies and gentlemen, and friends of ISAS. We will commence the panel discussion in a couple of minutes, but just before that I'll say a few words. It will be my privilege to be your chair for this event. As you can see, we have an excellent set of speakers to address the subject today, and Bangladesh challenges and opportunities. We have Dr. Mashiur Rahman, Economic Advisor to the Prime Minister, who holds a cabinet rank, and whose contribution to the shaping of Bangladesh's economic policy has been immeasurable. Through decades, actually. We have Mr. Md Halim, who is Director General of the PMO in charge of governance and innovation, which is a key responsibility. We have Mr. Aziz Khan, the top captain of industry, the success of whose corporate entity, the Summit Group, is a testimony to Bangladesh's growth story. Ms. Rubana Haq, one of the nation's foremost women entrepreneurs, and a champion, not just of female empowerment, though also that, but of many other societal values that mark the national ethos. And last but not the least, we have Samantha Farnaz, representing the Investment Authority, whose youth is a deceptive reflection of her intellect. The audience at ISAS is not no stranger to Bangladesh, and vice versa. Nonetheless, a brief intro to set the tone of the discussions by the chair will be in order. At its birth as a sovereign state in 71, Bangladesh was a war-battered economy confronting a myriad challenges. But it had vast intellectual resources that were pressed into national service. Skillful handling of foreign aid reduced external dependence significantly. The initial philosophical and ideological framework of a socialist mode of policy determination altered rapidly in consonance with the imperatives of globalization and perceived domestic needs. Bangladesh actually opened its economy even earlier than India. As a one-time diplomat, I'm happy to be able to say that Bangladesh has been able to negotiate for itself a preferential market access based on norms of spatial and differential treatment at GATT and WTO for its manufacturers. This is a subject that featured in our discussions yesterday with the Indian Commerce Minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. by using its what I would assume John Maynard Keynes would have described as a modicum of animal entrepreneurial spirit, Bangladesh has transformed their economy from a largely agricultural one to a mainly manufacturing one. It became foremost exporter of garments and a significant one of pharmaceuticals as well. Its burgeoning diaspora supports an economy with vast remittances. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has espoused the cause of a digital Bangladesh, to which I'm happy to say that the university, Singapore National University, has been providing upstream support. So across a spectrum of societal indices, Bangladesh has performed remarkably, to the extent, as you have heard from Chairman Pillay, that it has more or less become a far cry from the epithet of Kissinger of the early 70s, when he infamously called it basket case. Like ideas like non-formal education, microcredit, etc., emanated from its soil and spread worldwide. Today, many parts of the world march to tunes that were first piped in Bangladesh. But it's of course not without its challenges. They most certainly are, and they are perhaps legion. The population policy, surprisingly in a largely Islamic milieu, has been successful. The numbers are still huge. The youth bulge needs to be appropriately addressed. They need to be skilled and employed. The humanitarian predilections of the nation and the generosity of the Prime Minister's heart have welcomed 1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar, which have actually also, as you did appreciate, exacerbated the sacrifices from the Bangladeshi side. But it has also helped marshal a national consciousness in a deeply positive fashion. Bangladesh is a country anxious to move forward. It draws lesson from the classical Bengali wise counsel that should you wish to cross the sea, do not just stand at its edge and simply stare at the waters. I thank you. Okay, we will now seamlessly proceed to the panel, and without further tarrying, I will give the floor to for the next 20 minutes to His Excellency Dr. Mashiur Rahman, also, by the way, a fellow member of what we used to call the erstwhile civil service of Pakistan, to which he and I belonged. A person for whom I have entertained, by the way, a very deep regard and respect through the decades. Dr. Rahman, please.
Let me offer you my regards, and I wish I could reciprocate Iftekhar's introduction. I don't deserve that, it was his generosity. But let me reflect on Henry Kissinger that came up. Henry Kissinger said something about Bangladesh, but he was a strong believer in the gunboat diplomacy or hegemony or whatever you want to, by whatever name you want to call it. After we became independent, we needed assistance from outside. And World Bank, of course, was the major source. But the World Bank said that Bangladesh has to take responsibility for the loans which had been taken during Pakistan time. To make it much worse, they said that East Pakistan had the largest share of national income. So Bangladesh should take a larger portion of the responsibility to repay the loan. Here comes Bangladesh. Kargil was the vice president, and the last conversation was between Kargil and Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. When Kargil made that proposal, and he said that the World Bank perhaps cannot move without settlement of the pre-independence date. Among many other things, Bangladesh told him that millions of people have sacrificed their lives for independence and to remove the injustice which was inflicted on us. And now we want to perpetuate it. And Vice President apparently was a little puzzled. And he said that we did not get our legitimate share of the income of the country, and that's why we wanted to separate. Now we want to perpetuate that by imposing on us the responsibility to repay proportionate to what we had missed. We will not accept that. Now, he went back, and within the next 2 weeks, he wrote back to the government of Bangladesh that the government of Bangladesh accepts the suggestion made by Prime Minister Sheikh Mashiur Rahman. And the suggestion was that part of the loan which was spent in East Pakistan and in respect of which the assets are still there, the responsibility will be taken by Bangladesh, and that was the basis for settlement with World Bank, and they started providing assistance to Bangladesh. But let me now turn to my assigned topic, fundamentals, etc. The fundamental is a little slippery term in the sense that you look at some of the macroeconomic indicators, some of the microeconomic features, and try to interpret it in the context. Let me go over the elements as quickly as I can. I guess what strikes any observer of Bangladesh economy is its sustained growth and also acceleration from around 6% to above 7%. Now, you will see in many situations that there is a volatility. Sometimes the economy grows very fast and then it goes down and then it grows very fast. In our case, for about a decade, it was a graduated, accelerated increase of growth rate, and now we are above 7%. Some people say, and rightly, that in order to reach the middle income status, or to be installed in the middle income status, we have to reach 8+%. Our savings rate is about 30%, investment is about 30% of GDP. With that, a little bit of efficiency improvement, it's possible to reach 8% growth, which is suggested as the minimum that we require. Saving and investment, here is also another story of long-term stability. It has grown in small increments, but our domestic savings is roughly about 25%, and with external assistance, external savings transfer, our savings, the gross national savings reaches about 30%. Investment keeps pace with that. So it's a consistency between savings and investment. And the investment is slightly higher than the domestic savings, which is made by transfer of savings from outside. The transfer is from remittances, which has remained fairly stable. There have been some fluctuations in recent times, but I think we should not make too much of it. The remittance depends on employment in the Middle East and in other countries. The Middle East had many political trouble, but with the expected rebound of petroleum price and the policies that Saudi Arabia are taking, we would expect that the employment in the Middle East will remain fairly stable, will rise, and the remittances are unlikely to suffer too much. Inflation has been under control. It varies from 6-7%, and sometimes it is even below that. I tend to believe that there is some structural rate of inflation or structurally determined rate of inflation, and there's a kind of judgment that goes into it. And my sense is that our inflation ought to be between 6-8%. If it is above 8%, then trade industry are affected. If it is below 6%, it goes towards deflation. So with the kind of unemployment, idle resources that we have, roughly that is about the consistent rate of inflation. Tax revenue has increased steadily. It is still, the tax GDP ratio is still low. And I guess when we talk about low tax GDP ratio, we should take into account the structure of the economy. And I guess the criticism is sometimes commits the fallacy of agglomeration, if I can use that term. About 47% of the economy is informal. Agriculture contributes now 15%, and this 17%, 47% survey was in 2011. Agriculture there was 17%, and 30% was non-agriculture informal sector. This is by definition hard to reach for taxation purposes. So the formal sector for taxation is relatively small, about half of the total economy. And there are also many tax concessions given for export, for domestic production, for different types of entrepreneurship, different types of industry like small cotton industry, new entrepreneurs and so on. So if you take into account the tax credits, our accounting does not take into account the tax expenditure or tax credit. If you take into account the structure of the economy, the size of the informal economy, and the generous tax credits allowed by the government, you will find that the potential tax revenue is pretty high. The collection may be, the actual cash collection may not keep pace with that. Exchange rate and reserve. This is another admirable story. The reserve has been high, rising steadily, and we have 30+ billion reserve. Compared with less than 2 billion about 9 years ago or 10 years ago, substantially this is a contribution of the remittances, we must recognize that. Exchange rate have been stable. It varies around, if you look at the last 10 years or so, it is 75 Bangladeshi taka to a dollar to 82, something like that. So it varied between 6 and 8% roughly in the last couple of years. The stability of exchange is important for us because of our dependence on import of fuel and also fertilizer. So we are also now importing some wheat. So this has been a boon for the economy and for the stability and the growth of the economy. Export is another good story, but I guess we need to qualify that. The global environment has not been very conducive for growth of export. But in spite of that, our export held and it did not go down too badly. Our external sector or trade to GDP ratio is about 46-50% now, which is pretty high for the country that for an economy like Bangladesh. And in the last couple of years, we increased our trade to GDP from about 35 to close to 50%. It shows the focus on export. Now, why is export so important? Apart from having access to foreign currency, it is also important to allow the local entrepreneurs to expand. But Bangladesh economy, if you take it as a closed economy, is pretty small. If there is a successful entrepreneur who would like to expand his operations, his investment, and if you look at the new trade theories, they do advocate that a large enterprise can diversify, they can access larger market, and they can also increase their output because in the process of diversification and enlargement of output, they take the advantage of the declining marginal cost of production. So that's an opportunity that we are having. Interest rate also has been stable except for the last, for more recent times. And the deposit rate is around 8% and the lending rate has been about 12%, 13%. In some cases, particularly consumer lending is 16% or so. Lending for working capital, interest rate is alone is not a problem. The method or the efficiency of sanction, the efficiency of disbursement, etc. also are problem, but that is more institutional than rate itself. So given that the exchange rate stability and the interest rate stability, I would say that it does allow an investor to plan for the medium term, which may be 5 years or 6 years, the period during which the investor can recover his investment. So like inflation, the interest rate also has some natural rate. We may ask for something lower, we may ask for something higher, but somehow or other it goes back to some point and hovers around that point. Budget management is another area of our prudence and also restraint. Budget expenditure has grown steadily, and what we have been able to do is to contain the deficit expenditure. The deficit expenditure did not exceed 5%. In most cases it was 4.2, 4.5, but occasionally it reached 5%. The financing of deficit is another interesting story. Part of it was aid funded, but aid became less and less important as the proportion of GDP. How about local borrowing? The government avoided in most cases borrowing from the central bank, so it did not affect the money supply. Much of the borrowing was from household, and we call it this government saving certificate. There is some complaint that saving certificate interest is too high, and because of the high interest rate, money gets diverted to saving certificate and doesn't go into the stock market or into bank deposits. But that looks at saving certificate only as an instrument of deficit financing. The other social dimension of saving certificate is, if you look at the urban middle class, we do not have any social security system or national insurance policy. It's a self-financed post-retirement security for an urban middle class household, urban middle class person. And if you look at that, then there is also an element of premium for foregoing current consumption. So looked at as self-financing social insurance, there is justification for the higher rate, but if it is taken mainly for deficit financing, it is not. In the recent time, the government has retired loan rather than borrowed in order to finance the budget. So its social character has become more important than its deficit financing character. But if you look at the saving certificates as self-financed national income insurance, then it ought to be subjected to some actuarial test, which we have not done. So I guess we need to improve the management of the certificates and also take it through the actuarial calculation, which I guess would indicate that the short-term or the medium-term certificates be converted into an instrument that generates income over a longer period, which will put less pressure on the budget. Now it puts a lot of pressure on the budget. The government is implementing a large number of, we call it mega project. I prefer to describe them as transformative project. The major goal of these transformative projects are to remove the infrastructural inadequacies, bottlenecks, supply of gas, supply of electricity, transportation improvement, and so on. Part of it is to resolve the problems which have accumulated over time, but also it looks forward to what kind of future we expect. We do expect export to grow. We do expect domestic demand to grow. And if that happens, there will be a much higher volume of goods movement, cargo movement. So we need to improve all of these things and also improve supply of energy, supply of electricity so that production can take place. Now, having said that, let me refer to two aspects of planning or economic growth policies which are yet to be incorporated firmly in the vocabulary of growth. One is demography. As most of you know, Bangladesh is going through a demographic transition, and we talk about demographic dividend. Roughly between 2040 and 2050, we will start having a stable population, maybe toward the end of the decade, about 2050, the population is projected to start declining. But from now on to the middle of the decade 2040, 2050, we have a large working age population that gives us a dividend. But the population itself gives a dividend in the sense that if nothing else happens, the growth of population itself pushes up the growth rate to some extent. But that is not enough. We have to find jobs for these people, and we have to train these people to be productive. The government has taken up projects for skill training. There is a kind of reorientation of our thinking of education. One of that, again, I would say that there are 3 or 4 major elements in our new thinking of education. One is the enrollment of girls. At the primary level, girls' enrollment exceed, for a long time it has been exceeding that of boys, and the boys also repeat. So in terms of net enrollment, my sense is that the girls' enrollment exceeds that of boys. The girls' enrollment at the secondary level also is increasing. They are also moving into tertiary level. If it continues for say another decade or so, there will be an increase in the girls' enrollment. But we must recognize that the output employment coefficient is declining, and also there is a trend towards adoption of machinery for production. This will improve production efficiency, but it also brings in the question of how to create more jobs, and that leads to having more investment. And the investment perhaps would exceed the domestic and the saving that we have now, plus the managerial capacity that we have now. That does argue for a large-scale inflow of foreign investment. The sectors would depend on where we need them and where the investor wants to invest. Sustainability is another aspect of investment. In sustainable investment guru Jeffrey Sachs, he talks about clinical economics and the importance of geography. By clinical economy, he means that you have to recognize the peculiarities or special features of the economy. Unless you do that, you might be doing the wrong thing and you may not get the result. And the geographical features are important because without taking into account the water available, the rainfall available, the sunshine available, the climate impact, etc., you cannot really think of how you grow. The sustainability concept also is drawn from the Brundtland Commission. You must not use resources in a manner that you leave less for your following generation. But some people have criticized that as a little too narrow. It's narrow in the sense that if you look at the history of humankind, then each period improved efficiency by innovation of new equipment, new process of production, new machinery. So it is also improved efficiency in the use of resources. So with use of less resources, we produce more. Now, if you look at Bangladesh, are we consuming too much, or our investment is on the sustainable greed? Now, Kenneth Arrow had made some calculation of 9 or 10 countries of Asia. His basic calculation is GDP growth minus depletion of resources, investment in human capital, and so on. And he terms this as genuine investment. His conclusion was that Bangladesh and these 8 countries are not consuming too much. Their consumption is consistent with sustainability, and Bangladesh is one of those countries. What is more important to notice about Bangladesh is that it uses its genuine investment is somewhat better than most of the countries in the neighborhood. Then also an important element, important consideration is how do we decide on investment? And if the output from the current investment has to be more than what it used to be years ago, then the investment, the return from investment has to be calculated more carefully. So here comes in a new concept of inclusive wealth, which basically means you have a stock of assets and you transform the form of asset. My favorite example for that is you have a pasture for your cattle flow. You want to build an engineering college there. What would you do? And then you look at the benefit of the engineering college and look at dairy production. If you find that technical skill would help you, then you opt for the college. I have noticed that I must finish. It had come when I was talking about the girls' enrollment. I took advantage that the girls would get a little more time. And so, skill for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman. I mean, in a very lucid fashion, that was a very good expose of Bangladesh economy as is. You also gave some theoretical thoughts on how Bangladesh calculates and sort of defines its various stages of its economic growth, progress, and development. It's my pleasure now to call to the podium Mr. Md Aziz Khan. He is the founder and chairman of Summit Group of Mercantile Corporation. Summit is recognized as the largest infrastructure group in Bangladesh. It has investments in energy, ports, shipping, and information technology. And under his leadership, the group set up the first independent power plant in Bangladesh, the Khulna Power Company Limited, in 1998. Mr. Khan, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Dr. Iftekhar, thank you very much. Also, thank you for inviting me in this August gathering. I'm overwhelmed by Ambassador Pillai and not just now Dr. Mashiur Rahman. at whom I have looked for many years to learn and to understand his wisdom. All others who are present, thank you very much for again inviting me. The ISAS has been a cornerstone for bringing Southeast Asian countries into the forum and bringing them into the forefront of Singapore. I'm privileged to be now living in Singapore and therefore have a different context about Bangladesh and other countries around that region. I have been asked to talk about capacity building and sustainability. That seems like quite a difficult subject, given that Bangladesh has 160 million people in 55,000 square miles, and still, in my opinion, very, very sustained growth, sustained environment, economically sustained, as well as in all aspects. I find Bangladesh to be a golden star rather than something to be supportive. I personally feel that there is much more to learn from Bangladesh. That how do they become, as Ambassador Iftekhar had mentioned, the generosity of the country in accepting Rohingyas, or in the ways that many people follow various things in Bangladesh. Coming back to today's subject, I have requested my colleague Damien to help me with the slides. This is the first time I'm going through slides, but the slide concept came. I thought Singapore is a very technologically savvy place, and most of the listeners will be more interested in having slides. And then also, I'm not a captivating speaker, so that's another point that somebody you can look at something else. Sustainability, in my opinion, really starts from how the country is functioning. In today's world, of course, for running of the country, we have all come to the conclusion of democracy and free market economy. They go hand in hand, and Bangladesh, in that sense, has provided the first foundation. It's a democratic country for more than 30 years, continuing democracy. It has taken on free market with open arms, accepting investments, allowing investments, and moving on. So that's the foundation. Then the next context about sustainability is really, in my opinion, the 160 million people, as Dr. Mashiur Rahman had also mentioned, how to employ them, how to provide a situation where they can be well employed and they can move on. In my personal view, this sustained development requires a strong foundation of infrastructures. And that is where Summit is, and that's why I thought that it would rather be a better, as a case study on Summit, on how Summit is able to provide development as well as sustained growth in Bangladesh. Infrastructure is and in that, power sector is really the infrastructure of infrastructures. Without power, we really can't move on anywhere. And we have seen that the other infrastructures that are very essential for a country to develop is port. And of course, in today's modern economy and modern world, Internet of Things, which requires fiber optics. So these are the three areas that Summit has deeply focused in: generation of electricity, laying of fiber optics to create digital Bangladesh, as the government calls it, and to build ports. The government of Bangladesh has equally been successful in their endeavor to bring about ports, especially. We have a river port in Chittagong and Mongla, and then the government has now moved into creating deep sea port in Moheshkhali and deep sea port in Paira, enabling Bangladesh's very fast growing economy to both import and export. The labor market of Bangladesh is amazing. It's 165 million people, and the amount of people available to work is a huge indicator, as again Dr. Mashiur Rahman was talking about the demographic dividend. This shows in reality how this demographic dividend can come about to Bangladesh. about free market and the development of private sector especially in the generation of electricity side is something that is shown in the next slide. If you see the consumption of electricity today, more than 13,000 megawatts capacity, almost 54% is being provided by the private sector. This is an amazing achievement for a country like Bangladesh, which has just come about into the private sector, where the capital of the private sector is not so much, and it's amazing the way this happened. As a case study, that's why I chose power sector as in particular, that how this power sector has been able to succeed so well relative to all the countries of the world. It is not only Bangladesh, and we are talking about Bangladesh. It has done better than India, it has done better than Pakistan, with the Ambassador of Pakistan, High Commissioner of Pakistan over here, being able to say that, and across the entire, almost all over the world, this has done, really the IPP has done the best in Bangladesh. And this has been done by the government's very clear policies and providing incentives. In 1996, the government first brought in private sector power generation policy. That private sector power generation policy produced the foundation of how electricity can be generated in a country like Bangladesh by the private sector, which can support the development. The private sector power generation policy provided for very good bankable contracts, which enabled international lenders to provide funds at a very reasonable rate. Summit now receives rates at LIBOR plus 3%, 3.25%, with a 15-year, 18-year tenor. Those are amazing times. These are amazing times when you get these sort of things because of the bankable contracts. Recently, when the government found that the requirement for electricity is growing so fast that even with the private sector power generation policy, they were not being able to provide enough electricity for the development of education, health, industry, whatever you call it. So they brought in Speedy Supply of Power and Energy Special Provisions Amendment Act 2010, enabling the government to negotiate and take on electricity or buy energy. This has enabled a very fast growth of generation of electricity in Bangladesh, as well as provisioning of LNG. At this point in time, Bangladesh found that its indigenous natural gas reserves have come to a standstill at about 2,700 mmCFD per day, but the requirement has moved to 3,300 mmCFD and growing at about 10%, 12% per annum. So they brought in, under this act, 2 floating storage and regasification units. Summit is pleased to be able to provide one of them. Then Bangladesh also brought in the Energy Regulatory Commission, which is one of the frontiers that they have brought in between the licensor and the licensee, a relationship where the relationship provides, among other things, arbitration between the licensor and the licensee. And this has enabled huge development, and today there are more than 40 companies generating electricity in Bangladesh. In an emerging economy, in an economy of about $1,700 per capita income or $260 billion of GDP, which is about 4 times Singapore. Of course, Singapore is a very small country, but I was listening to the High Commissioner of Bangladesh. So in some ways, Bangladesh is much larger. Of course, population-wise, it is much larger. But Bangladesh is not a poor country. The people are still poor to some extent, yes. So the Energy Regulatory Commission has been also a huge help in relieving these things. We continue to be in a situation where there is huge electricity supply and demand mismatch. And that provides opportunity for many people. So in the context of Singapore as an investor, I would urge them to see this, and Singapore's Sembcorp has, of course, implementing a 400 megawatt power plant in Bangladesh, as well as a 600 megawatt or 650 megawatt coal-fired power plant. So Singapore has moved into the electricity sector in Bangladesh, and we welcome them work with them. The next amazing ability of the government has been their fast decision making in terms of importing liquefied natural gas. They have understood what is sustainability and the need for environmental as well as social needs, economic needs. The combination of these three, society as well as environment and economic need, have been exemplified by the government's fast movement in being able to import liquefied natural gas. They have decided this over a period of about 6 months and is implementing the project. The first natural gas inflow, imported natural LNG, regasified LNG inflow into the country will be on the 23rd of April this year. And then in Summit's terminal by the end of the year. I say the importance of LNG to power is because it is so much more environment friendly vis-a-vis other fossil fuel that many of the countries have taken this as the right step when they require provisioning of large scale electricity. Of course, the solar panels or the hydroelectricity potentials in Bangladesh are very minimal, so therefore LNG to power is the environmentally right aspect, right way to move on. It produces the least amount of carbon dioxide and no sulfur dioxide. It requires 1/3 the water. It requires 1/10 the land. For a 600, 700 megawatt coal-fired power plant, you would require somewhere around 200 acres of land. And in this case, for a 600 megawatt LNG-based power plant, you would require about 13, 14 acres of land. In a land-short country, that is a huge, huge advantage. I'll now come to a little bit about Summit Power International, the electricity generating company of ours, and try to show this as a case study of how this has been able to support the development of Bangladesh. We are currently generating about 1,200 megawatts of electricity, but in the next 3 years we are committed to generating another 1,054 megawatts of electricity. We're somewhere around 13 to 15% of the country's total generating capacity, and we intend to maintain that and perhaps move up to 20% if the government of Bangladesh permits. Bangladesh is an example of how in the last 10 years they have been able to provide electricity to its population. It is also an example how through the Rural Electrification Board it has been able to provide electricity to the rural areas on its 55,000 square miles. And as you can see in this chart, how this huge thing has moved up, how the almost like hockey stick curve it is moving up. And by 2024, by 2030, the government expects that electricity will be there in every home substantially, and by 2021, our 50th independence, we should be independent from brownouts or blackouts. The next one is a story I shouldn't talk about. I hope you will sometime be able to see all the awards that we have received. And then I would move on to the summit's contribution in the present day context. The leapfrogging ability of countries like Bangladesh, as we have seen in China, 10% growth year on year. That has been possible because of communication, the instantaneous communication that human being has been able to receive through the internet. And the ability to think together, to be able to confer with the rest of the world, around the world, at the same time and immediately take decisions. I have seen in my life of 45 years of business how from telegram to telex to fax and now to internet, the fastness of decision making. And Bangladesh is a recipient of that. And I'm very happy and proud that Summit has laid out the maximum amount of fiber optics enabling this movement. And today, I think about 40% of the country's fiber optics is provided by Bangladesh. The other very important infrastructure is, of course, ports. there is no wealthy country other than Switzerland who have become wealthy without ports, without being able to physically connect their imports and exports to the sea and take advantage of the huge global market, as some of my previous speakers were talking about, that the ability to take on the whole global market is crucially important. And that is also another aspect that Summit supports through its Summit Alliance Port Limited and Isfahan Summit Alliance Port Limited. Again, we provide about 15% of the containerized exports of Bangladesh and about 5% of the imports of Bangladesh. We intend to move on to the ports that are currently under construction by the government at Moheshkhali, Matarbari area, where they're going for deep sea port and enabling Bangladesh to take on the future opportunities that are coming. I'm sure with the Moheshkhali port and the Paira port, both of them are deep sea ports, Bangladesh's GDP growth would move on to 10% for a double digit. In conclusion, the way Bangladesh is currently moving, it is going to be sustained growth. It is going to provide employment to its 165 million people, growing at about 2%. And it is going to be a leader, somebody to be following, somebody to follow, some country to follow, rather than any other thing. And I'm looking forward to the day when I can be sure that my future generations will be living in the Golden Bengal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aziz. That was excellent. That was excellent. I mean, the data was fascinating, of course, but in many ways, the story of Summit does reflect the story of Bangladesh. How Bangladesh, through a partnership of the private and the public sectors, of the government and the private sector, civil society, has been able to largely tap what Aziz called the leapfrogging ability, which is essential these days in order to take advantage of what modern technology provides.